Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On the show, I try to highlight unusual success stories to help us all think outside the box during these highly unusual times. Over the years, many people have asked me whether they should seek their fortune, as it were, outside of the country they grew up in. And that's why today's episode is our EXPAT special, with my guest, Victoria Breckhoven. Because when we are thinking outside the box, we have to be open to all possibilities, including entirely different living situations. Victoria is an American-born European Union public affairs and communications expert who has been living in Brussels, Belgium for over 12 years, and she's a good friend of mine. We go way back. Perhaps the events of the last few years have you wondering whether moving to another country is advisable or even possible, and whether or not doing so would be career suicide. We cover a lot of the nitty-gritty details of choosing to live your life in another country, and Victoria is a great example of someone who has risen to success in a different culture, learning new languages along the way. She's elevated herself to the heart of EU affairs and public policy, and she's living proof that you can make it in a foreign country if you're tenacious and persistent. So with that, today's guest, Victoria Breckhoven. I'm here with Victoria Breck. Okay, somebody named Victoria is joining me now on the podcast. Victoria, thanks for being here. So glad to have you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me. It's my first podcast, so that's an exciting milestone in my life.
Well, that's good. Hopefully it'll be your last. I don't think your life's getting any more interesting. And we're off to a great start, folks. Now, I'd like to remind everybody listening that this show's purpose is to both educate and to entertain. So, the podcast space is pretty tough these days, Vic. So we gotta amp up the energy.
Up the game. Okay.
Any jokes, channel Robin Williams. That's the goal today. Robin Williams, 50 jokes per minute.
Okay.
Our JPM has to rise. Okay, so I'd like you to, if you wouldn't mind, give an overview. What do you currently do as best as you can? Where are you? Just give us the paragraph introduction.
Okay, yeah, the who am I in a couple of sentences. So I am living in Belgium right now. I'm originally from Connecticut. I've been in Belgium for 12 years. And I work in EU public affairs. And I am, what else do you want to know? Married to a German. Those are my highlights. Feel free to dig in anywhere you'd like to.
Sounds good. Well, one of the big reasons that I wanted to have you on is because we're doing, and I need to put effects on my voice when I say this. We're doing an expat show. Okay, I don't know if we can do that later. We're going to have to put something in there. An expat show. Because for whatever reason, we have a lot of people in this country being the United States of America, a lot of people that talk about or think about leaving the country. Some might say fleeing the country. Any idea at all why that thought might cross a warm-blooded American's mind?
It could have been related to our still current, but becoming former leader, commander-in-chief. So I don't know if maybe the recent election results has made anyone change their mind.
I don't know. I think he's done a spectacular job, and I will fight anybody who says otherwise. I'm sorry. I have something lodged in my throat. All right. So for whatever reason, from time to time, Americans feel the need to leave the country. Many talk about it, few do it. So how did you end up outside the country? Where did you get the idea that, hey, maybe I could live somewhere else in Europe?
So initially, when I was 17, I really wanted to learn another language. So I decided to move to Slovakia in order to learn Slovak, because I really wanted to learn a language that I said, I'll never learn this. I'll never be able to learn this in a classroom. So nothing mainstream. So I moved to Slovakia, and I was studying music at the time. And I lived there for a year, and I loved it. That was kind of my first taste of the abroad life, of everything being different from what you grew up with and what's normal for you, basically. So I loved it. And then I was there in 2003 and 2004 when Slovakia joined the EU. So then I started to become quite interested in the EU in general. And then that led me to choose a study abroad program when I was in university or college that was in the Netherlands, that also had a good kind of European studies program. And then everything kind of ran away from there. So that was the first steps, basically. Then after I studied abroad in Maastricht, in the Netherlands, then I went back again to do my master's after I graduated at the same university because I loved Maastricht so much. And then after that, I just moved to Belgium because it's the next logical step for a European affairs graduate, and I never left.
Okay. And for those listening, I know her, I know you from
Yes.
the very same program. That was how I ended up in Europe, was the Maastricht, the famous Maastricht study abroad program of whatever year that was, 2007, I guess. So, and you just stayed. And
2007.
to a degree, we both just stayed. I ended up staying for, I think, 8 years, and you have stayed entirely. And
12.
both of us, my wife is Dutch, so both of us ended up with European partners, which is a huge part of the expat game. So before we go on to the whole career stuff, I'd like to point out that I do know the best tongue twister in Slovak.
Oh my God, do you still remember it?
I still remember. Yeah, or rather, it's a tongue twister that has no vowels, which is unique to the Slovak language, and that is Sturch Perst Skurs Kirk. Which it's something, I don't know. It's not the Polish one. It means like the road that doesn't rain is dry. What does it mean?
Stick your finger down your throat.
Those Slovaks, they continue to delight.
Obviously.
Wonderful. Okay, so you just stayed, you finished your school, and then you stayed. Now, so to provide a little bit of context before we jump in. So to go from this thought of maybe one day I'll go over to another country, and now I would say that you have a very successful career. You're in the heart of European decision making, and so what's your official job title now?
So my official job title is EU Government Affairs Lead.
Okay, and can you shed some light on what that is?
Yes, definitely. So we have a lot of fancy jargon over here. So I am a lobbyist. We also call it public affairs, government affairs, government relations. All of these terms refer to the same thing, which is basically kind of providing a bit that interface between the perspectives of a company or many companies to EU decision makers to explain the impact of policies and share positions and contribute to public consultations and things like that.
Okay.
So, and I've been now for 1 year. Exactly, in fact. So I started in December of last year for a pharmaceutical company called Novo Nordisk.
Okay.
And before that, I was for 11 years in a consultancy where I was working for a lot of different clients, hundreds.
Hundreds. Oh my goodness.
In all sorts of like everything from like railroads to food to everything you can possibly think of, energy, yes. NGOs, animal welfare NGOs, wow. Everything you can think of.
That is crazy. So was this a conscious plan, or was this like so many expats you just sort of wound up here, or did you always want to do that?
So that's a really good question. I think, I think public affairs suits me very well in terms of my personality and skills. I tend to be a generalist. So somebody who I know now the EU decision-making process, and on issues, I'm obviously not as much of an expert as my colleagues are. But I think the profession suits me quite well. When I originally came, I was just looking for an internship in Brussels, like anything that would be, in EU affairs, basically. Right. And I guess it was also kind of by chance that I wound up at this consultancy, but really loved it and just stayed for a while. I guess that happens to a lot of people.
Yes, that does happen to a lot of people. I wonder why. So what about it? What about it did you love? What about it made you say, maybe there's something to it, to life over here? In socialist hell.
Well, Well, what I really like is that basically I find the quality of life really high.
Yeah.
So, we on a very modest, income, I feel that we live a very, very like happy life where, well, in previous times we could go out to dinner. But, like we could just, live a really, really nice life without, being super rich. So,
Yep.
I think the quality of life is really, really high. And I also personally like the fact that a lot of things are taken care of, like the health insurance, like all of these things that I think in the US are not a given.
Yes.
So, and then the last thing that I really, really like, last two things. Number one is the food.
Yeah.
Although the food in the US is also amazing, but it's just really, really good over here. And then I would also say walking. So I come from a small town in the US and there's no sidewalks. You have to drive everywhere you go, right? The store is a 40-minute drive. And here I walk everywhere. And that for me is actually a big quality of life improvement.
Yeah. And you walk and bike. That's true. And I think, for those
For
listening
sure.
who have never experienced it, I think Europe has gotten more expensive. But when I was there, it was so cheap. Like the amount of money that we needed to live was shocking. Like my girlfriend, my now wife, but my girlfriend at the time, we got an apartment across from the train station on the 5th floor in the heart of Eindhoven, the ideal apartment location with a huge balcony, and our total rent, including utilities, was 700 euros a month. So I got a job teaching English part-time, 4 hours a day, and not even every week. It was maybe 2 weeks out of a month or 2.5, 3 max. And on that salary, I would watch my bank account go to zero every single month, but everything was so predictable. There were no shocks. There was no tax. So I drank plenty of beer. I went to plenty of restaurants. I did everything that you'd want to do as a 20-something person. And that was just the way life was. Now it's like here in LA, even 10 times that amount won't get you to that same level of easy comfort where you're just not concerned about what's going to happen in your life, which is just truly mind-boggling. Yes. The differences.
Yeah, we went to the grocery store in the US with my husband and we bought like groceries for dinner that night and like
$50, $60, $100.
Like $100.
Yeah, $100, yeah.
What?
Let's get some creme fraiche, some organic vegetables. Oh, that shouldn't be too much. Just a little pasta for two. $98 and a bar of chocolate for $7. Or whatever, 6-pack of beer, 15, 20. And for comparison, at the time when we were there studying, you could get a crate of 24 bottles of beer for €3.17. And I'm pretty sure you got a portion of that back when you return the bottles, which is also super smart from a recycling. Instead of just melting down and recreating these bottles every time, you take the same plastic crate of the same glass bottles, you return them when they're empty, they give you money back, they clean and refill these bottles, saving God knows how much energy in the process. And the result is that you could, if you want, bad for alcoholics, you could drink for free, essentially. But that's just sort of life in Europe. Everything that matters is free. Great food is so cheap. Restaurants are so cheap. Healthcare, free. Dentistry, free. All of it is free. Public transportation, college, free. Right. So you have no money, so you're earning way less than your American counterpart, and the jobs pay way less, but the amount of money that you need is nothing.
Exactly. That is exactly it. And like, this is the quality of life thing that like, I don't need to be super rich because what we need is covered, actually.
Yeah.
And then also proximity wise, you take a 2-hour flight and you're in Spain.
Right.
Or wherever.
And it's a cheap flight, thanks to Ryanair and the various, well, at least it used to be. Who knows how it's all going to be shaken up now, but it was a cheap flight.
I think it's still, I don't know. I haven't tried
it's
to fly
even cheaper. It's like 20 euros to fly to Spain, 30 euros.
They'll pay you to get on the flight.
At all. Yeah, they'll pay you to get on the flight. Oh, man.
Please fly.
So
but this is definitely for me the thing.
Mm-hmm. This is I completely understand. And anybody who's spent more than a minute in Brussels would, I think, with all the resto frites snacks and the resto
waffles, chocolate, fries.
And Belgium has the best beers in the whole world. That's just undeniable. I will challenge anybody on that particular point. So, okay, at what point you started with Slovak, which I'm sure is highly in demand in Brussels right now as your first language. How many languages do you speak now?
So, well, English, excellent.
That's debatable.
Slovak, French,
I'm just kidding.
French, German, to speak with my
Unbelievable.
husband's family.
Yeah.
And then, so I studied Italian for years,
Right.
but I must admit now I feel it fading because I don't practice it. So I
Yeah.
hesitate to add that. I think, if you locked me in a room with some Italians for a weekend, I would probably be fine and walk out feeling more confident about it. But at the
Yeah.
moment, I'm a little, so let's say 4.
Okay. Four that you really speak them. I mean, obviously you're really good. So how often do you need
Yes.
those languages
Yes.
on a day-to-day basis for your work?
So unfortunately, Slovak never. But I have
Just
some
for
Slovak
fun.
friends, so I am
Okay.
just for fun. It brings me such joy to speak it because it just brings me back to that 17-year-old
Yeah.
moment of exploring the world, which
Yeah.
is unforgettable. So I love Slovak, and I
Yeah.
call my friends and I speak to them, and I refuse to forget it. But I don't need it at all. French, yeah, you definitely need French. So all of the administration, I've spent the day on the phone with insurance to try to figure out all these things. Everything was in French. And then for work, it's, I would say, English plus, in the sense that you are having, again, in normal times, not COVID, conversations with people from a lot of different countries. So if you can speak their language, the German politician, for example, then that's obviously a plus, but it's not needed. I would say English is really actually the working language in English and French in
Oh,
the EU.
interesting. I knew that it was, in a lot of other countries, but I didn't know. I assumed that French would be your day to day at this point.
Because also, even though Brussels is a French-speaking city, Belgium is also a 3-language country. So for Belgium, it's German, French, and Flemish. And so there's also a lot of complexity there, and a lot of cafes will speak English as well because they want to cater to both the Flemish and the French customers.
Okay.
So yeah, no, I would say so. English is quite often, and then of course we have a group of international friends as well. That English is the main language, but French you definitely need. I didn't speak it as well when I got here, so it wasn't essential that you have it before you come. But
Right. That's what I was going to ask. How important is it for people who maybe want to move to know another language?
Depends on the country. In Belgium,
Okay.
not that important. I have friends who still don't speak French, and it's fine.
Wow.
But I would say, I don't know, in Spain, for example, then I think or in Italy, then I think it gets very, very important, especially if you need to be dealing with administration and this kind of stuff, then I think it's essential.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on the country. But I wouldn't let that hold you back. I'd try it.
Yeah, sure. And obviously the best English speaking countries are the Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Denmark. I mean, they're unbelievable. The Swedish are near native. It's incredible. So I say, excuse me, can you tell me how to get to my hostel? And they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, my English isn't super great. Which hostel are you trying to get to? And then somebody else will join and they're like, oh, are you having difficulty finding your hostel? Let's see if we can't join forces and help you out. And you're like, yeah, your English really terrible.
It's perfect. No.
So okay, but the other thing is, so if somebody's like, I want to do this, I'm convinced that I want to live in a foreign country. They don't know a language, which of course I didn't. I didn't know Dutch when I went over there. I do now, but I didn't at that time. So if they don't know that language, there is of course the matter of actual immigration, which is kind of a bitch, right? I mean, it's not easy to go just plant your flag somewhere else and say, I'm going to live here, because there are enormous systems in place to prevent you from doing that. So how did you end up navigating that part of things?
Yeah, this is a really good question, because basically, I think what you have to do is find a study. For me, it was the study program. Basically, that there was a special internship visa that you could get if you were still enrolled in a university. So I basically got that, and then that helped me to get the internship, which then helped me to get the job, basically. But because it is more expensive for an employer, at least in Belgium, I don't know about other countries, it is more expensive in Belgium for you to be hired as a US citizen than it is for them to hire a EU citizen.
Is it because they have to sort of prove that they exhausted all possible local candidates before they can hire you? Technically, one of those things, yeah.
Exactly. And then they have to like write a letter to say why you are the only one who can perform this job and a European citizen can't do it. And then they have to pay all the visa fees, and then they have to. So it's administrative hassle. It's super costly, and most companies probably won't do it because, to be honest, they can find a European candidate. So I would say, if you're young enough watching this podcast to enter a study program and be able to get some kind of internship visa, that's great.
Yeah, that's the greatest
There's
way
also,
to start.
I would check also because I have friends. I know that there's very beneficial visa program in the Netherlands, for example. Maybe you know about that. That's for expats that want to come, you get like a 3-year visa for free, for example, or something. Yeah,
they didn't have that when I was there. I would have loved that. That would have made my life
I have
so
friends
much
who
easier.
went over last year on this visa.
Yeah, that's got to be new. Because I think my first visa was a semester. You know, it was like you have one semester, and then it was like extended to 1 year at great difficulty. But getting over that 1 year hump was, borderline impossible because we weren't married at that time. But like it's one of those things. I mean, there's an expression that they have in Dutch, which I'm butchering, but it's like being thrown from the dresser to the wall or something like that. But it means like each department is telling you conflicting information. That's a huge problem over there. Like. So it's like you go to the bank and you say, hey, I need to set up a bank account because they want to know that I have a bank account. And the bank will say, okay, great, just show us your citizenship papers. And then you go to the citizenship office and you're like, okay, can I like register for the next step? They're like, yeah, sure, just give us your local bank account. And I'm like, I see. So this is impossible. Okay. And they say it with such authority that you believe that there's got to be a loophole. But, of course, a lot of people that you find, they end up, in some sort of funny situation where somebody fudges a document. I mean, there's just so much weirdness, or at least there was so much weirdness about how it actually went down. And for a lot of the people that I knew, or you have to find somebody to employ. Yeah, like you said, but it's hard for an employer to vouch for you. It's not like an easy thing. They need to like say, oh, we are guaranteeing this many work hours and contract and all that stuff. So. It's going from like 1 to 5 was a lot of work for me.
Yes. Yeah, same. But then now, so did you get the Dutch citizenship?
I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to comment on that on the air.
Okay.
Next question.
Fine. Because I got the Belgian citizenship after, however many.
I'm not sure about how America legally feels about dual citizens.
No, it's okay. For the U.S., it's okay.
Okay, I thought the U.S. said if you ever even thought about supporting another country, you're automatically a traitor. And
no. There's a few other countries like that, like Germany, for example. So my husband cannot, and I cannot get German citizenship. That's a country where you have to pick. And this can always change. The administration can always change it. Yeah. So let's hope they don't. But for the moment, if you're a U.S. citizen, it's totally fine to have dual citizenship.
If your life partner or whatever. I mean, that there are conditions, right? Or if it's your kids. Or something like that.
I just have Belgian citizenship, and it's just me.
Okay. So it wasn't at all. I guess that's true. You started this way before. So okay. So it wasn't relationship based.
It's not related to my marriage at all. No.
Okay.
And
it was purely work, which is really cool. That's great to know.
Yeah.
For people out there like that. Okay, you don't need, because that's always been the sort of traditional thing. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna hitch my wagon to a SO.
Now, in Belgium, you just need to, there's different routes, but the easiest one is you just need to be employed continuously for 5 years. So if you come over here and you work continuously for 5 years, then with some paperwork, you can also apply for citizenship.
Okay.
So
now, did you have to
quite straightforward.
Go through any indoctrination programs, any sort of cultural programs? See, I feel like Belgium is so much more relaxed than the Netherlands in this. Because in the Netherlands, you have to go through this thing that they call inburgering, which is like a citizenship program, which is the most ridiculous thing ever. I think it's after 5 years you have to go through this program where you have to answer questions, but it's the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. It's so pathetic. Okay. And like the actual test has multiple choice questions. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, they're multiple choice questions that don't really have a clear answer, and they all presume that you're going to be working in some sort of like lowly job as either a server or a car mechanic. And it's
Like what?
I don't want to
questions
I don't want to
like?
disparage it too much, but they say it's your neighbor's birthday. What do you do? Do you A, get them a card? Do you B, do nothing? Do you C, get them a gift?
I mean,
This is like an official
not only
exam
cultural,
question.
but also personal choice.
Well, is it? I still don't know the answer to these questions because you just write an answer and then, you never get a response as whether something is correct or not. But the other thing is, you are serving coffee to somebody and they appear to be praying at the table. Do you A, set the coffee gently next to them quietly? Do you B, interrupt them while they're praying and, snap them out of it? Or do you C, wait until they're done and then bring the coffee? These are real questions, legitimate, real on-the-test questions.
It appears to me that these questions are less cultural and more about like how to be a human.
Yes, it is in a way that is probably fairly racist or racially insensitive. It's trying so far to not be racist that it's almost borderline.
Right.
It's like the opposite effect, where it's like, we have a random person, let's say, I don't know, Ahmed is, it's like all the random people just happen to have, these like Arabic names. So, it's pretty hilarious. But I think there was a certain point, you go to these classes every week for an extended period of time, and it's just so basic. And at that point, my Dutch was really good, so it was much better than the people in the room at that point. And so you're going to these lessons, and they're like, okay, you have 3 more months until you're ready to take the test. And I said, just sign me up for the test.
Let me just give it
They're
a
like,
go.
yeah, I have 3 months. I was like, I'll take my chances. When I was 10 years old, I passed the Anna Karenina book test on the computer just by guessing. I was like, I think I'll be able to figure this one out. So anyways.
But actually, so for me, for my process, I didn't have to do that because I had the 5 years of continuous employment.
Right.
And I have another U.S. friend who is here who applied and got the citizenship, and he did not have the continuous employment. So he had to do a similar test, actually. And he had told me also the questions were like maybe a bit less obvious, but still very similar in the sense of saying that the one he told me was, is it customary in Flanders, which is a part of Belgium, for mothers to spank their children?
Oh, ooh.
I don't know.
Obviously, yes. You don't know. No, it's got to be no. Of course, they can't encourage violence on a national test.
But it doesn't say. It's not encouraging. It's just saying, is it common?
Well, by saying yes, it's common.
That's judgment on whether or not it's right or wrong.
That's tacit encouragement. It is customary to beat your child here, in case you didn't know. So that's why they're so well behaved. Okay, so
but I never had to take it, and he never got clarity on the actual answers.
So what is it like now? I mean, you shared some of the stories of living in Brussels. It's obviously a hot spot. Now, this is pre-COVID. We haven't really talked a lot since this has happened. So I remember you telling stories of riots and, because it's the EU hub, it's the center of everything, there's a lot of chaos going on in Brussels that people probably don't realize. There's a lot of there's riots or people like dumping thousands of gallons of milk onto the streets, like dairy farmers unite and protest against XYZ. So what are some of the crazy stories of this time of working in government affairs?
Yeah, I mean, so all of that for sure. It's true. Now recently, because everybody's locked in their houses, I feel there haven't been as many protests, but on a normal basis, it's all the time. And some good ones. So my former office had a really great location, which was right across the street from one of these federal buildings, basically, where a lot of people were apparently unhappy with the decisions coming out of that building. And so it's exactly that, like the dairy farmers are there spraying milk all over the building, or the firefighters came to protest once and they were like spraying their fire hoses into the windows of the building. This kind of stuff. Really good stuff to watch.
But now it's all quiet on the Western Front because
now it's all pretty quiet.
Are people obeying the mandates?
Yeah, well, Belgium was hit pretty hard. I don't know why. We had I think we had one of the highest mortality rates in the world.
Oh my God. Okay.
So it's a super small country, but it
So
was
low
hit very, very
relative case
hard.
numbers, but high mortality rates. Or,
Yeah,
I mean, compared to the
maybe
US or
both.
whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
And so people are obeying, yeah, definitely. But we
Okay.
had basically total lockdown in the spring, and now
Yeah.
again we're on lockdown again. Although they recently reopened stores,
Okay.
so we had now for the past I don't know 10 weeks we had everything closed. So the only thing you could do was like the pharmacy and food shopping.
Wow.
But everything else was closed, and now the stores reopen like just before Christmas.
Okay. Of course. How
Of
convenient.
course. But now also like over the holidays, the recommendation hasn't changed, which is that you're
Okay.
only allowed to see one person outside of your living family or the people that you live with. You're only allowed to see one person.
And are
So
you able to do your job as a lobbyist remotely? Has that been easy or? Okay.
yeah, just life has changed because it's changed for
Okay.
everybody. So it's just
Well, that's good.
everything's over Zoom. Everything's over Zoom these
Okay.
days. Meetings, bilateral group, everything. Which, to be honest, for me, is not the end of the world. It's kind of nice to be in your
Just
pajamas on the bottom
slowly
every day.
transitioning away. It's like, yeah, I got a nice shirt on, but don't ask me
Yeah,
what's going on below the desk. Ugh.
exactly. Exactly.
Yikes.
Um, it's really nice. So I don't mind so much actually, but I have other friends who are having a terrible time and just really miss
Yeah,
like the physical daily
sure.
interactions. But I don't.
Sure. Yeah, that's
I think, I mean, in any case, it's coming back, right? Like, if you told me this would be life permanently forever,
yeah,
then yeah, I would have a huge problem. But
yeah.
for me, actually, the biggest negative for COVID or the thing that is killing me is just not seeing my family, actually, like,
Yeah,
because
that's
they're
hard.
in the US,
That's
obviously.
been very
So
hard for us.
that's the worst part.
Yeah.
The work thing, that's fine. I can deal with that.
hmm
Um,
But you
but yeah,
feel
seeing your family only
comfortable
through
at
Zoom.
least. And I'm assuming, you're much more well taken. And there's a thing over there that they don't have, at least they have it in the Netherlands. Permanent contracts is a concept that America does not have. US presumably have a
Right.
quote unquote permanent contract, right?
You don't have permanent contracts in the US?
You're joking, right? We don't have permanent anything. Are you kidding me?
That's
You can be
outrageous.
fired immediately from anything ever at any time in your life.
That's outrageous.
And there's always the
No,
possibility of
yeah, here.
lawsuits as well. No, okay. So for those listening, a permanent contract is a very European. How nice would this be, by the way? So after you've been doing a job for a certain amount of time, a couple years perhaps, or in some places even a year or
No,
two.
mine
Okay,
was directly permanent.
So they have a choice. So they can only offer you so many temporary contracts by law. At least in the Netherlands, they can only offer you so many temporary contracts before they are legally required to either get rid of you or offer you a permanent contract. Once you have a permanent contract, it is basically impossible to be fired or let go without some crazy list of stipulations that end up with you getting paid for a lot of time and months and years. It's
Like a
very, very
year.
difficult, to let go of somebody who is on a
Yes.
permanent contract, even with cause. Even if you caught that person stealing. I mean, with cause is obviously different, but even with cause, it's not easy to fire somebody. There's hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
So, yes, that is one of the many safety nets that just simply do not exist in America. You could work at a job for 30 years
Yeah.
in America, and they're like, see you later, pack up your shit. You have 15 minutes to go. Like, but what about,
Insane.
like, get out
No.
of here? Security has already been called. Did you use up one of your 3 vacation days this year? Because you don't get to keep those when you're fired.
No, that's
Yeah.
insane. No, it's permanent
So, of
contract. And I
course,
have a
like,
lot of friends in Brussels who got furloughed during
yeah.
COVID, but basically there's also government support so that you basically have the same salary actually. So
The
you're
same salary. I was going to ask.
from a
So do
yeah.
most people have the same salary? Has anybody taken a reduction in salary who's still employed? Is that a thing, or is it you're just getting your same salary for everybody?
Yeah, I don't know anybody that took a full-time reduction. I know for some people that got furloughed where they got the government money instead of their salary, that maybe it was like, 50 euros less or 100, like something very, very small, but almost the same amount of money basically. But that was only for a temporary period anyway. But I don't know anybody who got like a permanent salary reduction.
Wow. So how have you guys been able to survive on a one-time check of 600 euros for 9 months? Oh, wait, never mind. That's just what the U.S. government is doing. Oh, sorry. You see, I thought it was totally normal to pay people $600 for 9 months of joblessness.
And I got that too, by the way.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. I can rest easy at night.
I'm also receiving the stimulus checks.
Of course you are.
But I will have you know,
money.
But it's because I'm not legally employed in the U.S., but I donated them to charity, to food banks.
Well, that is wonderful.
So
we were touching on this stuff, obviously. I mean, that is the part that is so nice about living in Europe. I mean, yes, Europe has its own share of issues, plenty of issues and problems, and nothing is perfect by any means, but so much less stress on a daily basis from those types of things. You're not worried about where your next paycheck is going to come from. You're not worried about being homeless. You're just not worried about all of these things. And I think that if you listen to the debate in America, the way that they talk about socialism as being this terrifying thing or this enemy, the worst possible fate for Americans would be to go anywhere near socialism. But of course, I think what people don't fully realize is that you get a lot of stuff in return. And for the vast majority of people, the stuff that they get far outweighs the stuff that they would quote unquote give up. Imagine like what American wouldn't want total job stability and security right now? What American wouldn't want to know that going to the hospital for COVID related or for any complications wouldn't just be covered regardless of their personal situation? All of the things that you have is stuff that I think every American, even the Americans that vote against this stuff consistently, that they would want in their own life. Because it's like, hey, forget socialism, but then I'll go stand in line at a food bank for hours. Well, what about you want the food, don't you? And like they're happy to cash the check from the government. They want more checks. So it's like you think that you're just giving away money via taxes, which, of course, in Europe, the low-income people aren't getting taxed hardly anything. It's the high-income earners that do this. So everybody is able to live a nice, comfortable, middle-class life. Even students live a nice, comfortable, middle-class life. So it's just, it's just a total lack of understanding, I think, in the American discourse of what it actually means and why it would be so attractive.
Yeah. I really don't get it. I really, really don't get it when I watch like this fear of it's crazy. It's just
sheer terror.
I don't know. I just wonder. Yeah, I wonder if they're like. I wish we could have a parallel universe where America tries.
Where America just did it. Like if America turned into Sweden, right. And
then let's vote. Let's vote after 6 months.
Which is better, right?
And let's see where everybody stands.
Yeah,
that's what I would want.
Jeff Bezos'
but I mean,
net
in the
worth
meantime,
only $100 billion. He'll be worth less.
But in the meantime, I mean, I do pay like 52% of my salary in taxes.
But that's because you are a high earner now. I mean, at this point in your career, you would be considered relatively a high earner.
Yeah, but I think it's a pretty standard amount actually for Belgium. Like there are definitely also brackets,
flat rate.
Most people spend around half of their salary on taxes. On income taxes, which I don't know what it is in the U.S. Does it vary by state?
It varies by state, and it also varies by your income level. And I think that the one thing that U.S. has that Europe doesn't have as much is a number of ways for people to avoid paying the taxes that are due. I mean, look at these shell corporations and super PACs and all these political vehicles. There's tons of vehicles to disguise one's earnings and. Right. There's this whole cat and mouse game of how can we pay zero tax and get away with it.
Move to Ireland,
right? Which but yeah, I think the biggest shock because I grew up in the United States and then I moved to Europe, and the biggest shock was coming back to LA 5-6 years ago, whatever it was. Is just how much you are nickel and dimed here in surprising ways. It's very hard to account for your life here in the way that you can in Europe. Like, let me explain this. So we all know that there are tons of little 19.99 things that come your way. It's like, oh, just buy this for 19.99 a month. This 9.99 a month. 10. So you have all these little subscriptions in the United, like Disney Plus. It's only $6.99 a month, and then you're gonna need your Hulu package. It's $5.99. So you look at the end of the month, and you're like, where did all the money go? And there's just hundreds of these little that, like all the American marketing machine has just like roped you into all of these, and then there's tax on top of it. I just remember it being so easy to plan in Europe. So you're like, okay, my rent is €700. I'm going to spend 200 euros in a month on all of my food and drinks and going out, whatever it was going to be. And then you say like, okay, I start with 1,000. That means I'm going to end each month with 950 euros. And then that's just the end of it. Here it's like, 2,000 should be enough to cover that. And then you end up like $1,000 over. And you're like, how did that happen? Tax, all these little fees, all this little stuff. It's like swimming in a shark tank all the time.
Yes. You know what I got recently? So I don't know why I got offered this, but it was like for Apple TV. They were like, we'll give you 1 year free trial. Yeah. It's like, wow, like a year free Apple TV. That's a great deal. So I sign up, obviously.
This is a year ago, obviously. Clearly this is a year plus ago. Yeah.
The thing is, I'm a planner. You don't do something like this to me and expect me to forget. I have 2 years of calendars here for the next 2 years. Of course, I'll write that down. Yeah. So I had in my calendar, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about Apple TV. And I was, exploring, and of course, when I went to cancel it, I got a thing that was like, but wait, 6 more months free. Okay. But I was checking that then on Apple TV because I never really did a proper exploration. I literally haven't used it in the last year. Right. And there's nothing on there that's free. Everything costs money. So you go on there. Right. What in the world would I pay a subscription for if I still have to spend $10.99 to rent a movie? What? Yep. Who subscribes to this? Yep. So anyways, I just canceled it directly. I have no time for that. No time for that. But that's what I think they do as well, is this free trial stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's all about slipping in. And then you have to really be on top of your bank statements to actually see what's going on. I mean, it's very sneaky, but it's ever present.
Amazon Prime, I had the same thing, actually. Sorry. I had the same thing. No, and when I tried to cancel it, oh my God, it took me like 1 hour to find on the website where to cansel it. And I had to click like 17 times. Are you sure that you want to cancel it? Are you sure? Yes. Are you 100% sure? Click here. But are you sure?
Have one more free month. Just stay.
Yes, of course. They're like, we will give you a free month until you forget.
Just please don't set a calendar reminder for
indefinitely until you forget.
You will slip up eventually, and Amazon will be there.
It's terrible, but that kind of stuff is here too. That kind of stuff is here too.
You'd say it has to be creeping in, right? I mean, it's thanks to the internet.
Even if we don't have Amazon Belgium, but still, we have it on
How do you live?
Okay, Amazon. We order from other countries.
Okay, we order from Amazon from other countries. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. It's definitely like swimming in a shark tank at all times here.
But was that the biggest like reverse culture shock moment that you had when you got back? Well, what else?
I think that it's funny, you can reverse engineer this stuff a lot, but I didn't own a car for 8 years because I truly, truly didn't need one. If you've ever gone to the Netherlands, you don't need a car. It's not a thing. It's not like, I mean, you could have one, but it's almost more of a hassle than it's worth because you got to find somewhere to park it and you got to deal with it. But I lived across the street from a train station, and that train station would take me anywhere in Europe that I needed to go. We're, very close. I could take it to the local airport if I needed to get on a flight. I biked everywhere. The bike lanes are plentiful. They have their own traffic. They're isolated from the main roads. They have stop lights for bikes specifically, red, yellow, green, and you just really, and the bus system is fantastic. I took buses to gigs, and I was doing DJ gigs, and I would just take a bus. It never occurred to me not to take, unless I think like 1 or 2 days a year, there would be some far remote little village or something where I had to do like a show, and I needed to borrow a friend's car, like 2-3 days a year maximum. There was somewhere that I couldn't get to with public transportation. So flash forward to coming into LAX, mind you, I grew up in Colorado. So flying into LAX, the international terminal, we got a bunch of suitcases. We packed up everything. We put it in suitcases, and we're just showing up with 2 cats and giant suitcases. We're just ready to go. So I say, okay, where do I need to go? Well, I need to go roughly an hour northeast. So I look at the bus map, like that's a 45-minute, bus ride straight east, and then another 45-minute bus ride straight north. So we get on this bus at LAX, and it's an empty bus. No big deal, right? Kind of greet the bus driver like, "Good morning, sir. Like, how are you?" We get on the bus, and he's looking at us like, "What are you doing?" Which should have been my first clue. I should have just followed that impulse and maybe gotten off the bus. But we've got all this luggage, just looked like the most awkward fish out of water. And we go straight east, and straight east from LAX, for those who don't know, is Compton. It's the heart of, it's just a little different than Europe. Let's just say that. Just a teeny tiny bit different than life in Europe. So we're sitting there, straight east, somewhere near the heart of Compton. I mean, you could actually look up what it is, but anyways, we're just standing at this bus stop, and I'm just looking around, and it's like we're not in Kansas anymore kind of moment where you're like, okay, like life here is going to be vastly different than life in Europe. And, it's especially LA is, I think, probably the biggest culture shock, because here, there's so many homeless people on the streets. There's graffiti everywhere. There's hardcore gang graffiti everywhere. Like, there's just a general sense of like bad things could happen at any moment. And if you look at the the crime mapper, or if you look at those, which you should never do, by the way, it's just like every 50 feet is a pin that would be like national news in Europe. Like assaults, or like just, so like somebody running around with a gun right over there, helicopters all the time. So it's just this general feeling of what is happening
anxiety.
Here. Yeah, anxiety is a big part of it, but it's just, and of course it takes you some time. I think to its credit, not to let people think that I'm just disparaging it, there are many, many wonderful things. And of course, if you are able to stick around long enough to experience the other side, you will see all of these wonderful positives and amazing things that you wouldn't see if you just came here for a week and only saw Skid Row. Because there's a reason that we're still here after 5 years, and we didn't go running away, and it was because I wanted to give it a chance, and I'm really glad that we have. Because there's so many other things about the way that society operates, and I've always thought that Europe is like the land of gray, both in terms of weather, but also in terms of political and ambition. It's very, very easy to have a great life in Europe. It's harder to have an exceptional life. It's very easy to be in the middle of the road. Here, I would say that it is easier to have an exceptional life, but it's also easier to literally be homeless on Skid Row. And the most fascinating thing about, being in Hollywood is that a few miles over that way is Rodeo Drive, Bel Air, which is $100+ million homes. And if you go over there, you just breathe the air. It feels like it's a different atmosphere that was shipped in. Equidistant that way is Skid Row, which looks like worse than any third world country you've ever seen, or developing country, or whatever the correct term is for that. Just shockingly bad, tent cities. And now there's tent cities everywhere thanks to the pandemic, all over. So culture shock is huge.
It's crazy.
Massive.
Yeah,
but we have
I
the
think
sunshine.
that is it, right? It's that spectrum. The spectrum is smaller here somehow, right? And it's much wider over there. So you get from the worst case scenario to the best case scenario is much broader.
Yes.
We live actually here where we live across the street from the richest man in Belgium.
Okay. And he's also riding his bike to work, right?
And it's like, we don't live on the fancy street in the country. So don't know. But in terms of one thing you made me think of, when you were saying in terms of trains, you can get anywhere basically, even to like the most remote village. It made me think, do you remember when we went to the Schützenfest?
Yes, in Germany. Yes, near Düsseldorf.
We got there by train.
That's
I
true.
don't even know
in
where
Germany.
it was.
That's true. Some random little
That was
town in Germany easily got there via
like tiny town.
1,500 people, maybe population, right?
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you walk to the pub, you walk to the field where you're having the shooting fest. mini town.
I
We got
mean,
there by train.
life is like what Disney World is. I feel like Europe is like Disney World,
EXPAT.
even but like for real. So I think the Americans who go to Anaheim, they have this obsession with Disney. They're like, oh, this magical fairy tale world where everybody is safe and friendly and it's clean and polite. Why can't the rest of daily life be like that? And it's like, well, that's exactly what I felt when I landed in Europe the first time. I was like, oh, this is real. It's possible to have all of these things.
Yes.
I did not know that. Fascinating. So yeah, it's quite something.
Because I was thinking as well, we have a lot of like petty crime actually. So we have a lot of like house robberies.
Yeah.
Yeah, house robberies and like
thugs.
mugging, this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. Like I don't know anybody who has not been robbed in some way or another, whether it's pickpocketed or, at knife point or whatever, or their house. So that's quite common. But I think not having also guns like be legal is big.
There's tons of punks, just like pieces of crap that you meet in Europe. Just tons of them.
Yeah.
But they're almost like they don't, generally speaking, go farther than a movie bully. They're almost a caricature.
No.
And that
give me all your money.
There's limits. There's limits to how far they're willing to go. Whereas in LA, it's like, oh, there ain't no limits. Like, it's like, you better just shut up. Like, unless you want to be decapitated and hung upside down from an overpass, you better mind your own business.
Right.
But there, it's like, give me your money, punk.
Exactly. With a little tiny knife.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, okay. I'll give you my bank pass. There's only 500 euros in there anyways. So what are you going to get from me?
Happy spending.
Oh man.
Well. Yeah. So, but I mean, this still freaks me out. But it's a completely different level. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And of course, not that it's like a good thing. That would freak anybody out. And even a tiny knife being held, that's not good.
Right.
But there's just a lot, and the things that people miss, the things that you miss when you live as an American in Europe or vice versa, they're always different things than you think it will be. It's never the big stuff, because oftentimes, you get a trade. Like once you just synchronize with the wavelength of the people living around you, then you start to see the world the way that they see it, and there's a logic to it, and you kind of like fit in. And then it's just these little things that you start missing, like why don't Europeans believe that peanut butter and chocolate go together?
It's a match made in heaven.
Why do they believe that that's not good? And you're like, hey, what if we put peanut butter and chocolate together? And they're like, what?
Or if they just hate peanut butter, full stop.
But they love peanut butter. They love it.
No, in the Netherlands they love peanut butter. They love
the
their
Dutch eat peanut butter all day. Pindakaas, they eat it
No.
all day. Yeah. But it's just little, or like, or bits of junk food. A buddy of mine was a Canadian Air Force pilot, and he had access to a military base that was near Maastricht, actually. And so I was on as his guest one time or whatever. And they had a grocery store that was a lot like a Ralph's or a King Soopers or whatever, just a typical American grocery store. And I spent $200 that day, and it was all the craziest stuff. It's like Reese's peanut butter puffs, pickles, Reese's peanut butter cups, just all weird junk food. Yeah. And it's like, oh, apparently that is the stuff that I missed most of all, which I wasn't even like consciously missing it until I saw it on a shelf. And I'm like, oh my God.
But we recently had a very similar experience. So it was around Thanksgiving. It's every year, right? Where do we get a turkey? Because turkeys are not easy to come by here.
And here they're free.
Yeah, I mean,
free.
Here it's like you have to order it in advance. We ordered it in advance at the butcher. We ordered a 6 kilo turkey, and then they called us a few days before being like, we only found a 3 kilo one. So it's like, so you just literally went out and found a turkey and then you killed it, and now it's not the right weight, but it is what it is. Okay. Fine. Anyway, so on the back of this Thanksgiving planning, my friends were recommending this British store basically in Brussels, which I had never been aware of. And they were like, oh, they also have a lot of American products. You can find like canned pumpkin and stuff like this. And I went there and oh my God, I had a very similar experience.
Canned pumpkin, of course.
Like the breakfast cereal aisle, mental.
Grab
I
them
went
all.
mental.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I don't even like the sugary cereal.
Yeah, me neither. I don't eat it at all now that I'm here.
Cereal.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I'm like really a grandma when it comes to cereal taste. I enjoy like Weetabix, shredded wheat, grape nuts, like the healthiest cereal in the world. But you can't find those here. I love grape. Like they're so loud. They actually kind of hurt to eat them.
I miss grape nuts.
And they don't have them.
No.
So like these kinds of cereals, it wasn't even like Fruity Pebbles I was going for. Like the really lame, very healthy cereals. But I was like, oh, the breakfast cereal aisle in America is like a long aisle of nothing but breakfast cereal. Yes. And here it's like one tiny shelf of the tiniest store ever. You have like 6 boxes to pick from, basically.
Yeah.
And that's my and it's like weird stuff like Frank's hot sauce.
Oh yeah. Hot sauce.
Old Bay spice. Do you know Old Bay spice?
Oh yeah, I do. I mean, I never get it, but I've had it from time to time.
I love Old Bay. Like, oh my God, it's so good. On fish, on popcorn, I put on everything. You can't find that outside of America. So it's like, I realize it's really weird stuff like this. Yeah. That I go to the grocery store and like come out with the strangest cart ever.
Yes.
And that's the stuff I miss. I mean, obviously, first and foremost, I miss my family. But if we're talking about items, it would be random food products. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing, I guess since we're doing the expat episode with the effects on the expat episode, the other thing is that, the way that people think, which is interesting. I think it was Mark Twain who had a quote that said something like, if people just lived somewhere else, all prejudice would disappear immediately. Basically, if people just experienced living in another culture. Because I think that the thing that people who have never left, who don't even have a passport, who've never traveled with their passport, they don't know, is again, it's like, yes, things are different, but to assume that everything that is different is worse is a major, major assumption that is often false. Because some things will be worse. 100% everywhere you go, some things will be noticeably, demonstrably worse. Guaranteed. But there's always a trade-off. There's always something good that is also different that you don't see, that you may not understand right away. And, one thing that is really hard for Americans who go live in Europe is the service is very, very different. Like you could be waiting for a waiter for a long time. There's no concept of the customer is always right.
They're not going to be nice to you when they get there.
Right. There's none of these typical things that we take for granted in America, or, the grocery stores, they might close, or you'll see people stocking the shelves during business hours. And you say, if you put your American hat on, you say like, oh, how dare they be stocking the shelves while I'm shopping. As a customer, I am first. But then if you ask the owner, it's like, well, that employee has a family and they wanted to get home for dinner. So if they stock the shelf now, they can go home at a reasonable hour and we don't have to have them here all night. And you're like, huh?
Right.
Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? So there's just a lot of things like that. Yes, if the customer is always right, well, we love that as Americans when we're customers. But what about when you're an employee in America? That means that the employee is always wrong in the United States. And your whole livelihood depends on whether they decide to tip you or whatever, right? And in Europe, it's not the case that the employee is always wrong or the customer is always right. Sometimes there's room for both.
Right. If anything, the customer is usually wrong.
Because the customer is more often wrong than the permanent contract employee. Because it's like, well, we can't fire them, so they got to be right.
Yeah.
And it's this whole thing. But, I think as we sort of come to a close here, we are going to do some rapid fire questions before we go. But I think for those who are considering
I have one more thing as well.
Well, the blanket statement is that anybody who's considering it should try it. That's a wholehearted recommendation from both of us. And even if you only go abroad, I don't think it matters where you go, whether it's Europe or Australia or South America or Africa. It doesn't matter where you go. But I think anybody out there who's young enough and who's in a position to do a study abroad for 6 months, I think you just must. You're going to have a different view of humanity that is so important right now. That's my belief. But go on.
Yeah. No, I agree fully. No, the only thing I was going to say is that I don't think that it's just Americans also that face this, that have this actually, like that there are people who haven't yet been abroad. I think it's also a lot of other countries. And I also do sometimes face some like hilarious American stereotypes from people over here who have never been abroad or never visited the US, and things like where people are shocked that I know how to drive a manual car because I
Right.
thought that in the US there were no manual cars. Right? They're like, oh, no, but I thought you only had automatic. Like, no, it's definitely more common, but things like this, or like think that we don't even know what European football is. We've never even heard of it, or why am I not obese, or things like this. So I think it's just to say that it's not, it exists in other, like everyone in every country should go abroad and explore something. That's all.
Yes, that's right. Everybody should take advantage
not
of a
just
passport.
I don't know how many people abroad watch this, but
well, some, but they should all do it. It's vital, absolutely vital to get to graduate to that next level of understanding. Where in the beginning it's like, why don't they have free refills? Why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? Blah blah blah. Negative, 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 and then eventually you see the opposite. But if people could just stick around long enough to see the third level, where it kind of all makes sense, and where you see the totality of what is better, what is worse, what you're gaining and what you're losing. I mean, that's what I wish for anybody, is that they could experience that last level of total understanding of how another culture operates, which is really interesting. And also, they'll probably be learning a language in the process just by doing that, which is pretty cool.
Right. And then by learning a new language, you open your brain to like so many different things. Okay, go on.
All right, I know you're on a time crunch, so I'm going to do a couple quick rapid fire questions. Okay. So this one, very relevant to today. I've asked it before. Do you live to work or work to live?
Oh, I work to live. I think I probably work a bit too much, but I really, really love our downtime and family time. There's nothing more important to me. So I would still say work to live.
Okay. And along those lines, what is your goal right now? Do you have a goal professionally or just to survive?
My goal right now is to finish my executive MBA that is ending in June of this year.
Okay.
And so I have 6 months left of hard work, and then I'm hoping that I succeed in finishing that and my thesis and all of this. So that's my immediate.
Sounds good. And do you currently feel successful?
I do. I don't know if you mean not only like professionally, but like in life, I feel happy with my life. I feel very happy and grateful for my life. So I feel, I think, success is also, having a happy family and, all of that, of course, financial security and everything. But I think there's no area of my life that I have regrets about.
That is very, very nice. And your life is about to change for the better shortly.
Yay. Exactly.
We can talk about that, but a very exciting time.
Yeah, we can. I'm expecting a baby, so in March, and that's also why my next goal is finishing that MBA, because we're gonna have a 3-month overlap, and I'm a little stressed.
That's gonna be fun. I signed up. I wanted to do an improv class at UCB, which just recently shut down, which sucks. And I scheduled it. I thought like, when the baby is born, I'll do it right after the baby is born, because then I'll have more time. What an idiot. Who does that? I was like, I'll schedule it for the weekend after my baby is born, because once they're born, I'll have plenty of time to do.
And it'll be
hobbies.
Fine. Exactly.
I showed up, looked
my husband also did the same, right? He's just signed up for a triathlon. That's like 2 months after the baby's born. I'm like,
he'll be fine. He'll be totally fine. What could change?
Who needs sleep?
Your life will be exactly
in order to perform athletically.
All right. Got any good book recommendations?
So mostly I'm reading about like childbirth right now. So I don't know if I can honestly recommend those.
All right.
Everyone.
We're niching down on the podcast now. We're zeroing in. This podcast is for expecting mothers who are young enough to travel abroad. We're looking for expecting mothers ages 17 to 19.
Right.
Who are, okay, so yes, childbirth. Very good.
feel capable of getting that internship.
Yes.
No, Radical Candor. That's a book that I asked for
Ooh.
Christmas and that I got that I'm really excited to read. And I haven't read it yet, but
Okay.
I've heard it's really good.
Okay, exciting. Yeah, I've heard that that's good too. It's all the Silicon Valley rage.
I have a really, really good book. Wait, I have a really good book that's linked to the podcast, which is called My Year of Living Danishly.
Ooh.
And it's about a British woman who moves to Denmark with her husband who works for Lego. And it's about her year of like learning everything Danish. So it's like that expat life and everything. And it is hilarious.
Cool.
And really well written. Everyone should read that.
So, all right, no, that's perfect. Well, this expression we're going to have to change, but hindsight is 2020. We're going to have to delete that from our vocabulary. If you were to do things over, is there anywhere you would have zigged where you zagged? Or do you feel that things went okay?
I think things went okay. I would not have done anything differently. I think everything that maybe didn't go as I originally planned it was definitely for the best.
That's very good advice. The last piece here is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh. Don't sweat the small stuff.
That's pretty good.
I have a tendency to do that. I'm a worrywart. So that's like, it seems really obvious for many of you. I can make a sleepless night over something really dumb. Yeah. So that's the best thing that anybody ever told me. Just chill.
A sleepless night over something really dumb is also the European motto, by the way. That's something that Brussels knows a lot about. I don't know. I think so. It's like, we must have a committee to talk about the committee that we're going to form about what color the pens will be in the break room of the building. Some of you say dark blue. Some of you say a slightly lighter shade of blue. But the point is, we'll have an answer in a year and a half. Anyways, I've taken up too much of your time. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure. This has been a lot of fun. Unless you have any parting words.
It's been fun for me too.
The podcast is over.
No parting words.
Okay, then the podcast is
Thank you for having me, and I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah. Woo, we did it.
Yay.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Often Path podcast. If you've been enjoying this show, please like, comment, share, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to me on YouTube. It would mean the world to me. Also, do you have an unusual success story, or do you know someone who does? Well, please recommend them to me. They could be a future guest on this show. Maybe they've rolled the largest boulder down the mountains of Tibet, or maybe they built the world's largest chicken farm in Madagascar. The point is, I don't know what I don't know, so I'm looking for inspiration and unusual success stories. So help me by being a part of this adventure. I'm looking to grow this podcast with you. Thanks again for listening.